Senator John McCain, the influential Arizona Republican senator and two-time presidential candidate, died yesterday at his home near Sedona, Arizona. He was 81 and had an aggressive brain cancer for the past year. Crowds lined the route as the hearse bearing his body traveled from his ranch to a Phoenix funeral home last night. In Washington, D.C., flags were lowered to half-staff. And in Vietnam, where then Navy pilot McCain was captive for more than 5 years as a prisoner of war, mourners placed flowers on a memorial honoring him. As senator, his political leadership was key in normalizing relations between Vietnam and the U.S. John Sidney McCain III was born in 1936 on an American naval base, the son of a naval officer stationed in the Panama Canal Zone. He went on to attend the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, who both served as four-star admirals. McCain graduated in 1958 and became a Navy pilot 2 years later. He volunteered for combat during the Vietnam War. In October of 1967, his plane was shot down over Hanoi during a bombing mission. He was captured, beaten, and tortured, and held as prisoner of war for 5.5 years. In that time, he tried to take his own life twice and signed a coerced confession. He refused an offer of early release after the Vietnamese learned that his father was a high-ranking Navy official. McCain was released in 1973, returning to the U.S. a hero. In 1982, McCain began what would be his decades-long political career, winning a seat in the U.S. Congress from his home state of Arizona twice. 4 years later, he was elected to the Senate, where he remained for 6 terms. But his political career was not always successful. In 2000, he made his first presidential run and lost to George W. Bush in the primaries.
I know how to fight, and I know how to make peace. I know who I am and what I want to do.
In 2008, he ran again, this time winning the Republican nomination, choosing Sarah Palin as his running mate and then losing to Barack Obama. Throughout his long career in office, Senator McCain continued to be a political maverick. He opposed the use of torture during President George W. Bush's administration and sponsored an anti-torture bill that passed Congress and was signed by President Bush in 2005. In July of 2017, after surgery to remove a blood clot in his eye revealed a malignant brain tumor, Senator McCain made a dramatic return to the Capitol for a late-night vote against President Trump's proposed legislation to end Obamacare. His vote defeated the bill. Before the vote, he addressed his colleagues.
We're getting nothing done, my friends. We're getting nothing done.
President Trump frequently criticized and even insulted Senator McCain, both during the 2016 campaign and in office. Last night, he sent out a brief tweet that read, "My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you." In a statement, former President George W. Bush, who defeated McCain in his first presidential run, remembered him as a friend, saying, "Some lives are so vivid, it is difficult to imagine them ended. Some voices are so vibrant, it is hard to think of them stilled." And in his statement, President Barack Obama acknowledged his political differences with his former presidential opponent, but said they shared, quote, fidelity to something higher, the ideals for which generations of Americans and immigrants alike have fought, marched, and sacrificed. Today, Senator McCain's colleagues recalled his military career, his courage, and his devotion to service.
He made sure that he got no special treatment because his father was the four-star commander of U.S. Pacific Command. In fact, at that time, again, a real force in so many different ways, and always one who felt that serving a cause larger than self was the greatest of privileges.
He leaves a legacy of service and courage.
He would quickly forgive and move on, and to see the good in his opponents. That is something that, particularly these days, we could use a lot more of. That's a lesson that he taught everyone.
The senator who served his country in politics and in the military was both outspoken and brave, even when he was being treated for brain cancer and facing the possibility that he was nearing the end of his life.
How do you want the American people to remember you?
He served his country, and not always right. Made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of errors, but served his country, and I hope we could add honorably.
Senator John McCain's body will lie in state in Arizona's capital, then in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. His funeral will be held at Washington, D.C.'s National Cathedral. At his request, the eulogies will be delivered by former Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush. He will be buried at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland.